if we can make music that will appeal to the white masses of white America, we're going to make great music and at the same time sell a bunch of records. Hip-hop is an interesting thing, because at the same time you had, say, Smokey Robinson and all those guys at Motown, you had the Otis Reddings, who were part of the Southern-based music that didn't cross over the same way. Hip-hop has combined Motown and the Southern-based stuff with Otis Redding. The raw, quote, blacker stuff has been like Motown packaged for the white ear. Tell us, because you explain the process in your book, how that was able to occur, how you could take the raw and turn it into something like Motown that appealed to the masses of America.
Well, Motown had a very difficult circumstance, and it worked to their benefit. Motown, you couldn't see the artists back then. They weren't getting television coverage, and there was no music videos. So you would hear great music driving in your car. It was all about cars at that time. It was the car boom coming out of the 50s and 60s. And they would just hear great songs. So there was no prejudice because you didn't know who was singing on the other side. You just heard the great song. In fact, that became so true that the white artists started copying the music, and because they could get on TV, they're the ones who got famous, thus the Elvis Presley dialogue. I had a very interesting conversation one night. I had the fortune. I was at a Beyonce show, and Sir Paul McCartney was there, and her song Love on Top came on, and he started losing it. Crazy, losing it. And afterwards we went to dinner, and we started speaking, and he said, you know, when me and John, he's talking about the late John Lennon, we would go down to the docks in Liverpool, and we would wait for the American ships to come in. And we would give them cigarettes or whatever scraps we could get in order to get Motown music. And what we did when we were forming the Beatles is we would copy the Motown music. And we would do covers of it. And we became popular in England doing covers of Motown music. In fact, we did it bad. It wasn't even great. And when we first came to America, everybody was talking about the explosion of the Beatles. We were nervous because we thought that everybody would know that we had just taken the music from the Motown guys. And that's when he realized how horrible racism was in America, because they gave them all the credit for the music that they were hearing long beforehand. They just wanted to hear it coming from them, and they were doing a bad rendition of it. It's the same thing that the Rolling Stones did with the blues, copied the blues. And this is not like a made-up pro-black, super-duper Angela Davis moment. This is the facts. And you can listen to it and you can hear it. It's, you know, you can do the research very easily. It's not that hard to find. What hip-hop did was, because it had the aid of visualization, it could appeal to a very mass audience, either through liking the song, or teaching you the dance, or showing you the lifestyle. There were so many different elements that could entrap you to be a part of the party that it crossed over very quickly. So Kanye could make a song like Jesus Walks, put a hot beat behind it, and everybody forgets that he's talking about Jesus. Jay-Z could have songs that at some point may say something that's, you know, they'll sell by the night, it's eggshell white, right? You guys heard the song Big Pimpin'? You guys know Big Pimpin'? And nobody says anything about it because they didn't understand the words. So I think the rawness that you're discussing, or you're asking about, truly went under the radar screen. It wasn't raw. Unless you understood the words, really, did you know it was raw? Other than that, you just heard the beat, you started dancing. Right. And that's what made it be able to get and permeate into households.
Now let's talk about words they did understand, though. Not that reference to drugs, right? Mm-hmm. But the references to women and the entire issue of how women are viewed in hip-hop. Because one of the most successful global components of hip-hop has been the exporting of ideas about women. How do you explain to people who listen to hip-hop what its politics of gender are? Do you see it as simply misogyny dressed up? Do you see it as the the complicated exploration of tensions between men and women, and why does it have such a powerful resonance in hip-hop?
Good question. You know, it's very interesting. When I first heard, coming out of the West Coast, when I first heard the blatant use of like the word bitch, and it really started coming from the West Coast early. I mean, you would say other things, skeezers, my skeezer. It was, I mean, there's people who, you know, that term may apply to, right? They talk about men the same way, right? There's terms that are used that are slang to describe certain types of people. I'm not saying they're right, I'm just saying that that's the truth. And then all of a sudden, coming from the West Coast, for me, you know, you started hearing the word bitch and actually nigga used very freely. And I never understood why it got so much attention in the word. I think it was just a shock of hearing that word used so freely. Like, I could only think of what may have happened when Richard Pryor was using it in the 70s, where it was just so shocking to hear somebody talk about it with no conscience that it just became something that people was attracted to. Unfortunately, a lot of artists, or a lot of musicians that were not necessarily artists, would latch onto that trick and start abusing the term because they felt like if they said it, the shock value would bring popularity to them. And the misuse of it, the using it out of context and abusing it as a result to entertain, I felt definitely caused an issue. But like when I see Boys in the Hood and the way the word nigga is used in that movie, I am not offended at all. Not at all. It felt very appropriate given the circumstances that they were in at the time, dealing with what they were dealing with. But when you see other times where you could see it telegraphed, like it said, bitch or nigga or whatever it is, as a way to just get somebody to pay attention to the scene or to the art form or to the lyric that you just said, I think that's when it gets a little crazy. I think what Luke Skywalker did was a little crazy. You know, it was just a little crazy. If he didn't do that, he wouldn't have had an act, right?